Dorian Gray's character as he appears in the classic novel The Picture of Dorian Gray by Irish writer Oscar Wilde, first published in 1890. The work tells the story of a handsome young man as a symbol of beauty and eternal youth. But is it a blessing or just a curse? When standing in front of a reflective portrait of his flawless appearance, Dorian made a tempting trade-off, retaining his flawless beauty while all traces of time, sin, and lust will be imprinted on the picture. Every time I indulge in the pleasure of the keys, the decay in his soul deepened. But he couldn't stop, because pleasure is like an endless thirst. The more he pursued, the more empty and lost he felt. Modern society is no different from Dorian Gray. We are caught up in a never-ending race of fame, material things, and recognition. We believe that the more we own, the more we experience, life will be happier. But is it true? Or are we just trading ourselves off to run after the illusions of relief, and in the end only to receive the emptiness within? In this video, Tritdam will take you through the perspectives insightful from philosophy, psychology, and neuroscience to discover the true nature of pleasure. Is it the door to happiness, or is it the glare that binds the human soul? Dorian Gray comes to life as a symbol of youth and flawless beauty. But behind that radiant appearance is the invisible obsession of fading. From the moment painter Basil A. Howard painted the portrait, Dorian realized that youth was ephemeral, beauty was temporary, and from there, an invisible fear crept into his mind. He wished for the unthinkable, will always be kept in perfect appearance while the painting will bear all traces of time, sin, and lust. Initially, the life of Dorian is a series of days filled with pleasure. He enjoys the admiration of everyone around him, punching in lavish parties, passionate love affairs, and the feeling of unrestricted virginity. With all praise, all eyes long, the more Dorian believes that he is the winner of the game of beauty and pleasure. But he didn't realize that pleasure is a double-edged sword. It comes quickly, but also disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving a void like making him have to keep looking for more. The initial satisfaction gradually became an addiction to Dorian, who was no longer satisfied with normal experiences, but yearned for new, bolder things. He renounced his pure love for Sybil Vane, an actress full of dreams, just because the feeling of virginity has faded. He plunged into frivolous relationships, in power and urging to ascend to the throne. However, no matter what it touches, the feeling of satisfaction is always fleeting, leaving an empty abyss that nothing can fill. Traces of a depraved lifestyle is not shown on Dorian's face, but the portrait becoming more and more disgusting, reflecting his true self. Every time I admire it, Dorian was horrified again. Not because of the habits or aging, but because of the painting exposed the depravity of his soul. But instead of stopping, he encroached deeper into the temptations, hoping that pleasure would help him escape from the reality that is gradually surrounding. Dorian Gray's story is the perfect metaphor for modern society. We are like Dorian, are fascinated by appearances, by recognition from others, and by instant pleasures. Social networks become modern-day portrait where we create a perfect image and hide the flaws inside. But the more we pursue that perfection, the more I feel lost, far from my true self. Dorian Gray doesn't realize that pleasure is the other can never be soothed. The more he searched, the more he became a slave for the very things he used to control. So is pleasure really the key to happiness, or just a trap that keeps people forever trapped in vortex without stopping? Through the lens of philosophy, psychology and neuroscience, where we will learn the true nature of pleasure and how humans can escape its spiral towards a more balanced and meaningful life. Pleasure and happiness are always controversial topics. Controversy in philosophy for thousands of years. Three prominent philosophers, Epicurus, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche, have offered different perspectives, helping us better understand the system between pleasure and true happiness. Epicurus believed that pleasure is the path to happiness, but it is not the pursuit of extravagant pleasures. He distinguishes between necessary pleasure, simple needs like food, friendship, and peace of mind, with pleasure vanity like fame or power. According to Epicurus, true happiness comes from control of desire. Enjoy simple things and stay away from excessive desires. If Dorian Gray had adopted this philosophy, he will learn to appreciate small pleasures, instead of indulging in insatiable luxury. However, just like humans today, Dorian believed that admiration, money, and beauty were the measure of happiness, which Epicurus' warning will only bring suffering. In contrast to Epicurus, Arthur Schopenhauer looked pleasure with pessimism. He thinks that life is a never-ending series of desires. When we achieve a goal, we are only satisfied for a moment, then he continued to crave something else. This is the lap endless of dissatisfaction and suffering. Dorian Gray is a testament vivid for Schopenhauer's philosophy. Every time pleasure is achieved, from admiration to sultry relationships, he quickly felt no enough and plunged into new pleasures. However, instead of achieving happiness, Dorian felt more and more empty, just as people today are constantly pursuing material and successful without ever being truly satisfied. Schopenhauer warned that the only way to get out of this cycle is to reduce your desires and learn to accept life as it is. But in fact, people today are now often unwilling to do so. Nietzsche did not deny pleasure, but he doesn't see it as the biggest goal. Instead, Nietzsche considered pleasure as a tool to promote self-development, help people rise up and conquer your limits. According to him, high-class pleasures, coming from creativity, intention and desire to conquer, is the path to true satisfaction. If Dorian Gray lived by Nietzsche's philosophy, he would not be obsessed with external recognition that will look for real value from within. However, instead of using pleasure to grow, Dorian lets it control him, turning into a dependency into the desires and admiring eyes of others. In today's society, Nietzsche reminds us that success and happiness do not lie in enjoyment, but in what we become the best version of yourself. From the above three perspectives, it can be seen that if left unchecked, it can become a place of human imprisonment in a circle of dissatisfaction and meaninglessness. Epicurus teaches us seeking happiness from simplicity. Schopenhauer warns about the endless cycle of desire, and Nietzsche encourages people to turning pleasure into motivation to rise. Dorian Gray is a clear lesson about not being able to control pleasure. He let it take control of his life, ran after the relief, and finally realized that pleasure is never enough. Like Dorian, we may be pushing ourselves in an endless race of pleasure without even realizing it. Through the story of Dorian Gray and the classical philosophies, we can draw some valuable lessons for today's life. First, enjoy pleasure lovingly, cherish the little moments, and find joy in simplicity. Second, reduce desire, learn to know enough and accept the present, instead of constantly pursuing far-fetched things. Third, towards long-term value. Pleasure is just a means, not the purpose. Let's search development and meaning in life. From the perspective of storytelling, we see that pleasure can be a subtle trap. But what makes people not can resist the attraction of pleasure? To understand better, let's treat learns from the perspective of psychology. Pleasure is not just a feeling, but an integral part in the psychological structure of people. From primitive times, the brain has been programmed to search and respond with pleasure as a survival mechanism. However, in the modern world, where pleasure can be easily achieved, without too much effort, man falls into a spiral of endless longing, never feel enough. Dorian Gray is a perfect example of loss of control before pleasure. Initially, the joy of admiration and love is enough to satisfy him, but over time, that satisfaction fades. Dorian is no longer feeling happy with what you have. You desire more, deeper relationships, stronger experiences. The praise does not stop. Why we always feel deprived even if many achievements have been achieved. The human brain works based on a powerful reward system, of which dopamine is the core factor. Dopamine is a substance neurotransmitters play a role in motivating people looking for fun and rewards. When we achieve a small success, the brain releases dopamine, creates a sense of euphoria and motivates us keep taking action to achieve more. This problem arises when humans become dependent on this mechanism. Like Dorian Gray, when we get used to previous achievements, we no longer feel satisfied with the same level of pleasure. This phenomenon is called sensory adaptation, hedonic adaptation. That is, what once made us happy in the past will gradually become normal and we will longing for something stronger. In life now, this is becoming clearer than ever. Social media is a good example. Every like, every compliment, at first it gives us a feeling of excitement, but then we feel empty and it takes more to continue to be satisfied. We're trapped in the dopamine loop, making pleasure never enough. And there are a lot of stories from the rich to the very rich. They still fall into this vanity trap. According to the theory of comparison, according to psychologist Leon Festinger, human beings tend to measure the value of themselves by comparing themselves to others. In the case of Dorian Gray, The obsession with pleasure comes not only from within, but also from the pressure of high society, where everyone craves perfection, wealth, and status. Dorian not only wanted to keep his beautiful paintings, but also want to seize everything pleasure that others can dream of. We look at seeing other people's perfect lives, lavish vacations, fulfilling relationships, brilliant successes, and wonder if am I missing something? This comparison creates invisible pressure, forcing us to keep searching pleasure to prove their worth. One of Dorian Gray's greatest tragedies is the loss of the ability to love sincerely. Initially, he fell in love with Sybil Vane with all purity and enthusiasm, but pleasure from love gradually faded, and he began to look for new relationships to replace the original chalk feeling. This reflects a common psychological reality. When people don't feel satisfied with a long-term relationship, they have the tendency to seek novelty on the outside, leading to the never-ending cycle of longing. Many psychological studies have shown that pleasure in romantic relationships not only depends on the initial feeling, but also as long-term nourishment and development. But people today, like Dorian, often ignores this, but focuses only on instant pleasure. So how to break the cycle of pleasure? Psychology offers many ways it helps to control the need for pleasure and find more sustainable satisfaction. Some of the solutions include practicing mindfulness, learning to appreciate the present moment, instead always looking forward to what has not been achieved. Slowing down and receiving small joys in life is the key to getting rid of the cycle of pleasure never ends. Limit exposure to constant stimuli. Reduce time on social networks. Reduce the consumption of pressuring information to focus on your true self-worth. Redefining success. Instead of measuring to material justice and social status, let's aim for peace within long-term spiritual values. Build a sincere relationship. Search and retention meaningful relationships, rather than relationships that only to satisfy the need for temporary pleasure. Set personal boundaries. Learn to say no to these tempting and controlling one's own desires so as not to get caught up and into the vortex of instant pleasure. We need to learn to master desire. Search satisfaction from real values, rather than pleasure to guide them. Remember, pleasure is part of life, but it is not the whole life. And from a neuroscience perspective, you'll understand better how the brain controls pleasure and why we are easily caught up in the loop, never ending. As we all know, the human brain works on the reward system, where dopamine plays a key role, a mechanism that makes people never real satisfaction with what we have. Imagine when you first very enjoying a favorite dish, feeling delicious makes you extremely satisfied. But then, as you eat it over and over again, the initial interest fades, and you start looking for flavors, more novel taste to stimulate the taste buds. This is how the brain is caught up in a never-ending spiral, just as Dorian Gray never felt enough with beauty and admiration from society. Similarly, people who are addicted to substances stimulation also falls into this loop. Initially they only need a small amount to feel the chalk, but gradually, that dosage is no longer enough to give the same feeling as before, forcing them to intensify their use more. As a result, they became slaves of other uncontrollable cravings, and life gradually fell into a stalemated collapse. When humans abuse pleasure, the brain gradually becomes dependent and forms neural trails, keep them coming back with behaviors that bring satisfaction, even though we know that it can be harmful. This explains why many people can't give up the habit of constantly surfing social networks, excessive shopping, or seeking recognition from others. Regular exposure with such strong stimuli can impair enjoyment's simple joys in life, leading to emptiness and emotional stalemate. Like Dorian Gray, more and more depending on the fun, modern people also fall into the circle of create pleasure that cannot be escaped. To control pleasure and find a balance, Trittam advises you to practice the popular French called dopamine detox, dopamine reading, i.e. temporarily stop contact with these sources. High pleasure stimulation such as social networking, excessive consumption, or entertainment or continuous dopamine stimulation. When the brain is reset, it becomes more sensitive to small pleasures in life, such as reading, going for a walk, or enjoy moments of peace. In today's world, the important thing is not the type of cow that is completely pleasurable, but to learn how to master it, enjoy simple things, and move towards more sustainable values. Through the story of Dorian Gray, not only a literary work, but also a wake-up call strong in the nature of human pleasure and endless desire. From a philosophical perspective, psychology and neuroscience, we have discovered that pleasure, even though it is an indispensable element in life, it can become a double-edged sword if not properly controlled. Dorian Gray chose the pleasure of living alone, believing that it would bring happiness and immortality. But the more he pursued, the more they fall into the abyss of emptiness. Like Dorian, modern humans are also affected by caught in the vortex of instant pleasure. From chasing pooled values such as beauty, fame, money, to momentary pleasures such as social networks, season, and fleeting relationships. The result is a life full of fleeting moments of satisfaction, but absent true peace and contentment. The training of the independent spirit, focusing on intrinsic value, will help us get rid of this dependence. Ask yourself, what really carries long-term value for your life? Instead of letting pleasure dominate, orient your life with sustainable values such as love, dedication and self-development. And always remember to practice mindfulness, to know how to stop first when caught up in the instant coaxing. It also helps you learn to appreciate the present, instead of forever chasing the distant future. If you consider pleasure as a tool to experience and enrich life, it will become a part of positive in the journey of growth. But if it is left to control and lead, pleasure will turn into an invisible prison, imprisoning people in a loop of deprivation and dissatisfaction. Take the time to reflect and make small changes, like enjoying everyday moments, building relationships, and live a purposeful life. Don't let pleasure control you. Master it and direct it according to the path of sustainable happiness. Dorian Gray's story ends in tragedy, but your life doesn't have to be that way. Stay alert to temptations, seek true value, and live a full life. Happiness is not a destination, but a journey that you can choose right now.